On the 2nd of February, 2014, the world woke up to a headline that felt unreal. Philip Seymour Hoffman, an Academy Award-winning actor at the very height of his craft, was found dead in his Manhattan apartment. He was only 46. Around him lay the silent evidence of a battle he had fought in private for decades. Syringes, envelopes of heroin, the residue of a struggle that even fame, wealth, and critical acclaim could not silence. To millions, Hoffman was the face of transformation. He could slip into roles with such raw honesty that audiences often forgot they were watching an actor at all. From the haunted brilliance of Capote, a performance that earned him the Oscar, to the conflicted priest in doubt, to his scene-stealing turns in The Master, Hoffman was hailed as one of the greatest actors of his generation. He wasn't the Hollywood leading man with a sculpted jawline. He was something rarer, a chameleon who embodied truth on screen. And yet, behind the applause, Hoffman lived with a darkness that even his closest friends feared. Addiction had stalked him since his early 20s. Though he managed years of sobriety, the pressures of fame, the weight of expectation, and the loneliness that fame often conceals drove him back into the shadows. The contrast was stark. Here was a man who could command a stage, who could bring entire theaters to silence, yet he spent his final hours alone, consumed by the very demons he had once overcome. His death was more than a tragedy of one man. It was a brutal reminder that genius and torment often walk hand in hand. But the truth behind Hoffman's journey is far deeper, far more heartbreaking than the headlines suggested. Philip Seymour Hoffman was born on the 23rd of July, 1967, in the quiet suburb of Fairport, just outside Rochester, New York. At first glance, his upbringing seemed ordinary. His father, Gordon Stowell Hoffman, worked as an executive at Xerox, while his mother, Marilyn O'Connor, was a family court judge. But beneath the veneer of a stable, middle-class household, there were fractures that would leave their mark. When Philip was only 9, his parents divorced. He and his 3 siblings were raised primarily by their mother, a woman whose strength and independence influenced him deeply, but who could not shield her children from the emotional scars of a broken home. As a boy, Philip was shy and introspective. Unlike many children, he did not shine in sports or social circles. Yet he carried within him a restless imagination. He found early solace in books, and especially in the flickering light of the television screen. Movies fascinated him. The idea that someone could disappear into a role and emerge as another person entirely was, to young Philip, nothing short of magic. A pivotal moment arrived when he was 12 years old. One afternoon, his mother took him to see a stage production of Arthur Miller's All My Sons. Sitting in the theater, Philip felt something stir inside him. Years later, he will recall that night as a revelation, the moment he realized that acting could be not just entertainment, but truth, a mirror reflecting the hidden struggles of life. From that point on, he was obsessed. Yet his path was not without obstacles. Philip was plagued by insecurity about his appearance. He was stocky, with sandy blonde hair, and often cast aside in a culture that idolized athleticism and conventional good looks. But these doubts became fuel. They gave him an empathy for outsiders, for characters on the margins, an empathy that would later define his art. At Fairport High School, he threw himself into drama, finding in the theater a sanctuary that classrooms and locker rooms could not provide. Teachers quickly noticed his intensity, his uncanny ability to dissolve into character. He wasn't just reciting lines, he was living them. By the time he graduated, acting was no longer a dream. It was his calling. He pursued it with determination, enrolling first at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. There, among peers equally hungry for recognition, Philip honed his craft. He studied the mechanics of performance, but more importantly, he learned discipline, the ability to channel his turbulent emotions into something precise, something powerful. It was during this time that he also faced one of his earliest battles, a creeping dependence on drugs and alcohol. Even in his youth, he felt the pull of substances that offered escape from the pressures of expectation. Still, the boy from Fairport had chosen his path. He had found the one thing that could transform his insecurities into strength. Acting would not only give him a career, it would give him a voice. And yet, as Hoffman stepped out of school and into the professional world, he discovered that talent alone was not enough. Hollywood was a fortress guarded by rejection. And for years, the young actor would struggle to even get a foot inside the gate. When Philip Seymour Hoffman left NYU's Tisch School of the Arts in 1989, he entered a world that was far less forgiving than the classrooms and rehearsal halls where his talent had flourished. New York City was alive with aspiring actors, thousands of young hopefuls, waiting tables, auditioning endlessly, and grasping at any small part that could keep their dream alive. Hoffman was just one among many, burdened with the same insecurities that had haunted him since childhood. Casting directors often overlooked him. He wasn't the Hollywood archetype. He lacked the chiseled jaw, the athletic frame, the smooth charisma producers crave. Instead, he was stocky, rumpled, with a vulnerability in his eyes that defied the industry's obsession with glamour. Yet this was the very quality that, in time, would set him apart. His early years were filled with rejection. He auditioned for commercials, television roles, and theater productions, more often than not walking away empty-handed. Money was scarce. Like so many actors, he worked odd jobs, waiting tables, taking part-time gigs to pay rent while living in cramped apartments. There were moments when the dream felt impossibly distant. It was also during this period that Hoffman's struggle with addiction deepened. The pressures of auditions, the constant rejections, and the gnawing sense that he might never break through led him toward alcohol and drugs as a way to quiet the storm inside. Friends from the era would later recall nights where Philip, though gentle and kind, seemed to wrestle with an invisible weight. He entered rehab in his early 20s, a decision that likely saved his career before it had even begun. Still, even in failure, his talent began to shine through. Bit by bit, he earned minor roles, blink and you'll miss it appearances in television and small films. One of his first significant breaks came in 1992 with a small but memorable role in Scent of a Woman, opposite Al Pacino. Though he had only a supporting part, audiences and critics noticed the intensity he brought to the screen. Hoffman didn't play characters, he inhabited them. Yet success was far from guaranteed. After Scent of a Woman, he faced the same struggle. Countless auditions, endless waiting, parts that barely paid the bills. He often played unglamorous, flawed, even unsympathetic characters, drug dealers, bullies, outcasts. Hollywood had no leading man roles for him. But Hoffman, with quiet determination, began to carve out a different niche. He embraced the parts no one else wanted. Each rejection and each minor success hardened him, shaped him, and prepared him for the turning point that was yet to come. He learned to turn weakness into strength, to use his physicality and vulnerability as tools rather than liabilities. Slowly, the industry began to take notice. But Hoffman's rise would not be a sudden leap. It would be a climb, a relentless struggle marked by risk, self-doubt, and the constant temptation of relapse. And then, in the mid-1992nd, he would encounter the kind of roles that revealed his genius to the world. The mid-1992nd marked the beginning of Philip Seymour Hoffman's transformation from an overlooked character actor into one of the most respected performers in modern cinema. His journey had been slow, painstaking, and marked by small supporting parts, but those very struggles had honed his craft. When the right roles finally came, he was ready to astonish the world. Directors began to notice something rare in Hoffman, an ability to elevate even the briefest appearance into something unforgettable. In Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights, 1997, Hoffman played Scotty J, a shy, closeted boom operator in the porn industry. It was a minor role, yet Hoffman's tender, heartbreaking portrayal of unrequited love left audiences shaken. In just a few scenes, he managed to capture vulnerability, longing, and quiet despair qualities that would become his artistic signature. Anderson, recognizing Hoffman's genius, cast him repeatedly. In Magnolia, 1999, where he played a compassionate male nurse. In Punch, Drunk Love, 2002, as a brash mattress store owner. And most famously in The Master, 2012, opposite Joaquin Phoenix, where Hoffman embodied a charismatic cult leader. Each role stretched him further, each performance solidified his reputation. Hollywood was beginning to realize that Hoffman wasn't a conventional leading man, he was something greater. He could disappear into any character, no matter how broken, repulsive, or complicated, and make the audience not only believe, but empathize. He embodied the philosophy that acting was not about vanity, but truth. His breakthrough culminated in 2005 with Capote. Cast as Truman Capote, Hoffman faced the daunting task of portraying one of America's most eccentric and recognizable literary figures. He studied Capote's voice, his mannerisms, his rhythms, until the transformation was complete. Critics hailed it as one of the most remarkable performances of the decade. For this role, Hoffman won the Academy Award for Best Actor, as well as nearly every other major award that year. Overnight, he became a household name, but success did not change him. Hoffman continued to choose complex, challenging roles rather than chasing box office glory. In Doubt, 2008, he played Father Brendan Flynn, a priest accused of abusing a child. His performance, layered with warmth and ambiguity, left audiences questioning his guilt or innocence long after the credits rolled. In Charlie Wilson's War, 2007, he stole scenes from Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts, earning another Oscar nomination. His supporting roles were often so commanding that they overshadowed the leads. Beyond film, Hoffman never abandoned the stage. Theater was his first love, and he poured himself into it with the same ferocity he brought to cinema. As a member of the Labyrinth Theater Company in New York, he directed and acted in numerous productions, proving his devotion to the art form that first ignited his passion as a boy. By the late 2000s, Hoffman had become something rare, an actor admired equally by critics, peers, and audiences. He had no image to maintain, no star persona to protect. Instead, he was respected for his fearlessness, the willingness to expose his own vulnerabilities in service of his characters. Directors trusted him, fellow actors revered him, and audiences were mesmerized. Yet with every triumph came a mounting pressure. Fame brought new opportunities, but also the weight of expectation. Hoffman was no longer just another working actor. He was now hailed as the greatest character actor of his generation. Behind the accolades, however, old demons were stirring. Addiction, once tamed, had begun to creep back into his life. Still, in these years of ascent, Hoffman carved out a body of work that would define his legacy. He had achieved what once seemed impossible for a shy boy from Fairport, New York. He had risen to the summit of his profession, acclaimed not for his looks or charisma, but for his truth. But as the applause grew louder, so too did the silence when the curtain fell. Hoffman's rise was dazzling, but it set the stage for a darker chapter 1, in which his most formidable opponent was not another role, but himself. For all his brilliance, Philip Seymour Hoffman lived with a shadow that never loosened its grip. Addiction had first entered his life as a young man, and though he fought valiantly against it, sobriety was a fragile balance. For more than 20 years, he stayed clean, crediting therapy, 12-step programs, and the grounding force of fatherhood for keeping him on course. He and costume designer Mimi O'Donnell built a family together, raising 3 children. To outsiders, it looked as if Hoffman had conquered his demons. But the pressures of fame, the exhaustion of constant work, and the loneliness that even success cannot cure began to wear on him. In 2013, whispers emerged that Hoffman had relapsed. He admitted himself into rehab after using prescription pills and heroin again, startling those who believed his struggles were in the past. Hollywood's most respected actor was suddenly vulnerable in a way that shocked colleagues, because Hoffman, the man who could embody any weakness on screen, seemed invincible in life. Behind closed doors, things unraveled. His relationship with O'Donnell, already strained by the demands of his career and his addiction, fell apart. Though they remained close, he moved into a separate apartment in Manhattan. Friends later recalled seeing him withdrawn, exhausted, haunted. He continued to work, filming The Hunger Games, Mockingjay, even as his personal battles escalated, but the toll was visible. The contrast was heartbreaking. On screen, he was still mesmerizing. A steady presence in every scene, precise, powerful, utterly convincing. Off-screen, he was slipping. Addiction isolated him, pushing him into the same solitude he had so often portrayed in characters. Hoffman, who had spent his life giving voice to the voiceless, found himself trapped in silence. Tragedy struck on the 2nd of February, 2014. Hoffman was found dead in his West Village apartment, a syringe in his arm, surrounded by bags of heroin and prescription drugs. The news rippled through Hollywood like an earthquake. Colleagues mourned not just the loss of a great actor, but of a kind and generous man. Directors like Paul Thomas Anderson spoke of him as family. Fellow actors remembered his humility, his refusal to embrace stardom, his devotion to the craft. But beneath the tributes lay a deeper sorrow. Hoffman's death was preventable. It exposed the brutal truth about addiction that no amount of success, talent, or love can guarantee escape. It also forced Hollywood to confront its own culture of pressure and silence, where vulnerability is often hidden until it is too late. The scandal was not one of crime or betrayal, but of fragility. The man celebrated for his honesty in art had been consumed by the very demons he so often portrayed. It was not just the fall of an actor, it was the unraveling of a human being, a reminder that genius comes with its own unbearable cost. Hoffman's story, like so many tragic tales in Hollywood, left behind an unsettling question. If a man so deeply admired, so outwardly accomplished, could not survive his own battles, what hope is there for others walking the same path? And yet, even in death, his legacy refused to be defined by scandal, because while addiction claimed his body, his artistry remained untouchable. Philip Seymour Hoffman's death left a hole in Hollywood that could never truly be filled. He had been more than an actor. He was a reminder of what cinema could be when stripped of vanity and artifice. In an era obsessed with celebrity culture and box office numbers, Hoffman represented something pure: the craft, the discipline, the pursuit of truth in performance. Today, his legacy lives on in the roles that defined him. His Truman Capote remains a benchmark of biographical acting, studied by young performers for its nuance and authenticity. His work in The Master, Doubt, Boogie Nights, and countless others continues to inspire, proving that supporting roles, when embraced with honesty, can become unforgettable. Theater too bears his imprint. At the Labyrinth Theater Company, Hoffman championed new voices, directed daring productions, and mentored younger artists. Many who worked with him recall his generosity, his insistence on collaboration, and his refusal to let ego overshadow art. For Hoffman, acting was never about fame, it was about connection. Beyond the stage and screen, his most enduring legacy may be the conversation his life reignited about addiction. His death forced audiences, colleagues, and the industry itself to confront the reality that talent offers no shield against despair. In interviews, friends and family have spoken of him not with anger, but with compassion, urging society to view addiction not as moral failure, but as illness, a struggle that even the strongest can lose. Today, his children carry his name, and his work continues to ripple outward. For audiences who watch his films, Hoffman remains alive in every glance, every pause, every trembling breath that revealed the fragile humanity of the characters he portrayed. Philip Seymour Hoffman's story is one of dazzling triumph and devastating loss. From a boy in Fairport who once felt invisible, to an artist who revealed invisible truths to millions, his journey embodies both the power and the peril of genius. He showed us that greatness does not come from perfection, but from the courage to bear one's flaws. And though his final act ended in tragedy, his body of work ensures that his voice will never fade. Hollywood lost a man in 2014, but it gained a legend whose spirit endures every time the lights go down and the screen flickers to life.